Welcome to the Berkeley Climate Change Network podcast. I'm Bruce Reardon. I'm the director of the BCCN. Today, we are going to spotlight Berkeley's fast-growing innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem with our special guest, Darren Cooke. Darren is the brand new Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer, the CIEO for the campus. Welcome, Darren.
Well, thank you, Bruce. It's my pleasure to be here.
So you've been the interim CIEO now for that lasted maybe 18 months, something
What,
like that.
21 months.
21 months. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And now you're the official as of a few weeks now. And so congratulations. But before we talk about the job and your vision for it, talk a little about your background. How did you get to Berkeley? The different jobs you've held here on campus.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for asking that. Fair to say my background was is not traditional for coming into this position. So going way back in time, I was a grad student here in mechanical engineering in the early 90s. I was in Tony Keaveney's orthopedic biomechanics lab, and I was thinking, what am I doing? I couldn't foresee actually what I wanted to do with another degree in mechanical engineering. And just one thing led to another. I discovered going to law school seemed like a good idea. So I left campus in 1996 to go to Columbia Law School, graduated in 99, became a patent litigator, mostly in the life sciences space because that had been my background in well, undergrad and in grad school. And then, 6 years of being a busy patent litigator, I got my dream job. And for busy patent litigators, associates in law firms, the dream job is to go in-house, they call it, to go
Mhm,
in-house, have
mhm.
a 9 to 5 job, working in a corporation. Went to UC Berkeley's first biotech startup, BioRad Laboratories,
Ah,
here in the East Bay,
okay.
and ran the IP department for 10 years. So that was my background. In 2015, I kind of caught the startup bug. We looked at a lot of startups at the company, and one of them we acquired, Quantalife, and it was so exciting. It was a 50-person company. It raised a bunch of money, and those folks came in, and I thought, wow, I'd like to work with these folks, not my. I mean, Bio-Rad is a fantastic company, but it's 8,000 people and it's a corporation, right? So I thought, how about I just go out on my own? I'm an attorney. I
Mhm.
can hang out my shingle. I did that and represent startups, with patent issues and IP issues and licensing. And this is where one thing led to another. So
Yeah.
suddenly I live near Berkeley, actually an alum of UC Berkeley, and I started just coming to events on campus. I never would have predicted that. The first thing I did was become a mentor for UC Launch at the at the business school. I met people in that program, and that really just at this point, I could go on forever about one thing led to another. But fast forward, I started teaching at Haas in the NSF Corps program in 2017, uh, launched the BioTrack at Berkeley Skydeck in 2018. And then in 2021, the then Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer for the campus, Rich Lyons,
Mhm.
brought in a gift to build this virtual life sciences entrepreneurship center, just based, to tie together resources across campus. Berkeley LSEC, we called it.
Mhm.
And so Rich hired me to do it. And really, it was just the two of us. It was a center, but it was just a network, right? And then when he became the chancellor in 2024, I moved into his old role. And that's when the 21 months started. So I was interim chief innovation and entrepreneurship officer at that point, until just April 1st of this year.
Well, it's a great trail to follow, and I think great for students that are listening to this or anyone that's thinking about doing something new. Get out there and be seen and do things that are interesting and look at the different, I mean, you laid out what, 4 or 5 different steps there
Yeah.
to get you to the interim. So now you're the permanent, as permanent goes these days, the permanent CIEO. Talk a little bit about what that job is. Tell our audience a little about the innovation and entrepreneurship kind of ecosystem, and what's the role of the
Hmm.
CIEO?
Yeah. Well, so I think of it as three distinct parts, and they're actually about evenly weighted. So there's the outward facing stuff. So telling Berkeley's story. We wrote a book called Startup Campus, how Berkeley became an unexpected leader in innovation and entrepreneurship. Right. And, so there's the outward facing stuff like the book promoting the pitch book rankings. So pitch book, the definitive database of venture everything, has league tables that rank the number of venture-backed startups that are founded by university alumni. And Berkeley is number one by a big margin. Number two is Stanford. May not be surprised to learn, but we're number one by a big margin. So we tell those stories.
And
Um,
Darren, how do you get out and tell that story? The book is one. We can talk
yeah.
about that in a minute, but what are the channels that you use to get Berkeley's story out there?
Well, you may know that I have a pretty big following on LinkedIn. So,
Hmm.
and it's funny because my personal LinkedIn account gets way more views. The last 12 months, 750,000 impressions just from my personal account, way more than the UC Berkeley Innovation and Entrepreneurship main account, right? So it's just cultivating a social media presence, going on podcasts. I mean, I mentioned to you before this that someone decided to put me on a 3 hour long podcast where it was just a deep dive on everything. And I did 12 podcasts last year. So just to get the word out that way.
Yeah. Okay. So one is
One is
outward.
outward
Yeah.
facing, global reputation stuff. Number two, and Bruce, you know this well, it's the inward stuff. It's conducting what I call conducting the ecosystem.
Mhm.
I think people are surprised to learn. I know they are because I pose this question in presentations that I give. How many organizations on the UC Berkeley campus do we have that promote or involve innovation and or entrepreneurship? And people say, I don't know, a dozen or something, right? There's going to be a few. And then I put up a slide with a bunch of logos on it. And I said, would you believe there's 75? Yeah. I mean, there's 75 orgs on campus. And Bruce, yours is one of them, right? That involve innovation and entrepreneurship. And I run this Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council where we bring together leaders from those 75 organizations once a month. And behind the scenes, we're working hard at finding ways to collaborate, coordinate, synergize. We do it through a shared database, which you know well,
Mhm.
but I suppose your listeners are not as familiar with it. A shared database where we just find ways for these 75 different organizations, find ways for them to work together, and it kind of works like magic. I
And
think one of the biggest,
that is the Begin database. Yes.
okay, so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
begin.berkeley.edu database, specially curated database, has all of the innovation and entrepreneurship resources on it. And it's curated by founder stage and whether it's an incubator, accelerator, funding source, that kind of thing. No, the database I was thinking of is what we call the wins and opportunity sheet. That's once a month. I don't know if people are interested in this, but
No,
because
come on.
this is nuts and bolts kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Hmm.
Everyone on the INE Council registers at least one win, one thing that their organization did in the previous month that they would just like to share with the rest of the group. It doesn't have to be much, but you got to do something. But we agreed as a group, everyone should put something in the wins column every month, even if it's little. Beyond that, you can put stuff that didn't work, stuff you need help with, stuff you can help others with. And it's simple as anything because this is literally just a shared Google sheet
Yeah.
that everyone has access to. But the connections made and the ideas for ways to work together, joint events that happen just because of this simple sheet is really something.
And it's such a critical thing when you have such a big place like Berkeley. And
Yeah,
you have, as you said, not 10 or 12 groups in the I&E kind of ecosystem, but more like 75 or 80 or even more.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so the output and then, or the outside and then the inside, and what's the third part of this?
Oh, can you guess? No, well, No, I think most people wouldn't guess because they don't realize that tech transfer reports into my office. So patenting, licensing, industry-sponsored research, VC-sponsored research, all the kind of the nuts and bolts and the foundational stuff and the legal licensing IP, that's part of my office. And so I oversee that as well. So
So three
that's
parts. And where do you sit? You're in the VCR office, yes?
Yeah, so I report to the vice chancellor for research.
Hmm.
So which is the most common. So I have nine counterparts. University of California has 10 campuses, so I have nine counterparts. We are arranged mostly the same way. So the chief innovation person on campus reports to the vice chancellor for research, I guess for historical reasons, but that's the way it's set up.
Yeah. And is this CIEO, like you said, it's a position that appears on the different campuses. Are all those fairly new too, as well? This
They
is a
are.
recent
Yeah.
phenomenon. Yeah.
It's funny you ask this because I think we thought we were first, right? The genesis of this position was the then VC Vice Chancellor for Research, Paul Alivasados, commissioned a report back in 2018 to say, hey, how do we make sense of all this stuff happening on the Berkeley campus? And the number one recommendation was we need to hire somebody to make sense of all this stuff happening on campus. And we hired Rich
Yeah.
Lyons. He was just ending his 10-year term as dean of the Haas School of Business, and it was a perfect opportunity to bring him into the role. However, I've later, and we thought Berkeley was first to do this. I have counterparts who have been in their roles that predate that, which
Okay.
made me realize, wait, okay, we maybe not exactly the first, but we were almost.
That's fine.
That I know, but since then, every other campus has brought in folks who are counterparts to the CIEO role. Sometimes it's just called Chief Innovation Officer, or
Yeah.
different. But we, that group, we get together once a month and compare notes. And there's synergies there. I mean, I'll tell you, I can't tell you the number of times where Berkeley has figured something out, and then suddenly all other nine campuses say, "Well, we want to do that too,"
Great.
and we share it.
Great. Well, as you said, Darren, you're the second CIEO for Berkeley. So you've been in the interim job for a while and now it's yours. Talk about your vision for this job and for the I&E ecosystem going
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah, Phil, thank you for this question because, I think it's actually helpful to know what is my biggest challenge in the role at the moment. And it's not, and when I tell people what it is, they're pretty consistently surprised. And you're going to hear this and say, well, that's a nice problem to have. However, it's still something we're trying to figure out several times a week. And this is because of the chancellor in the role that he's in now. Rich Lyons is, of
Mhm.
course, now the chancellor, and he's still promoting innovation and entrepreneurship from that office. And it's the Startup Campus book, and it's the pitch book rankings, and it's the podcasts that we all appear on. Suddenly, we have 600,000 living alumni from UC Berkeley. They come out and say, wow, Berkeley is just knocking it out of the park. It's amazing. How can I help?
Mhm.
And we don't have enough opportunities for them to help. So here's an example. I just met with an alum, proud Berkeley alum, been at Apple for 15 or 20 years. He was the designer of the first AirPods, right? I mean, and he came back, he said, hey, I know a lot about hardware, startups, technology. You must have companies and startups on campus who I could advise or help them figure things out. And the fact is, this is weird to say, we have too many of him. We haven't yet figured out a way to harness this huge alumni database of eager, proud Berkeley alums who are genuine experts, and they're just looking for ways to help our ecosystem. And I think a good example of this is, Berkeley Skydeck we have almost 1,000 volunteer advisors now
Mhm.
at Skydeck, 975. Do you know how many there's an application process to become a volunteer advisor at Skydeck. We get 500 applications a year from people who just want to volunteer, and they're experts, they're alums, they just want to give back. And we take 40 because you can't add another 500 a year. So that almost overwhelming amount of alumni enthusiasm and support and expertise is something we're trying hard to tap into. And so I was on a previous podcast where I threw this out there. I said, you know what? I think we could 1000x the amount of alumni engagement we're getting around innovation and entrepreneurship. And the 1000x kind of stuck. So now we're calling it UC Berkeley 1000x
Okay.
as just an umbrella term for huge alumni engagement in entrepreneurship, venture, uh, yeah, just it's like looking for ways to harness that.
And that's great. What do you think that's going to look like? What are your ideas so far that have you've been dealing with this challenge for a little while now?
Yeah, we haven't figured it out. That's the
Okay,
funny
that's
thing. Yeah.
okay.
So I'm not kidding. I just yesterday I met with somebody, a Haas MBA grad, who's at a point in his career where he's saying like, hey, just how can I help the ecosystem? I said, that's a good question. Because we have almost too much help. And then I used the opportunity to brainstorm with people saying, how could we harness this?
Mhm.
And people have ideas and AI is usually involved. And, like we have thoughts. And I'll tell you, I think the solution is not one more platform. Like it's not going to be, hey, well, put your name in a database.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's probably not the path.
It's something more personal than that. I
Yeah.
mean, we've run into this with the climate network that
Yeah.
we're at a earlier stage than you are, but and I don't have 1,000 at this point, but hundreds. And it's
Yeah.
how do you connect them in a meaningful way? How do you
Mhm.
help them connect in a meaningful way that you don't have to be the center of it all? And then in this case, how do you tie the people that all the startups that could use the help or all the would-be
Mhm.
entrepreneurs on the campus
Yeah.
to these alums this is where maybe as humans we're not set up for this yet. Maybe
Yeah.
the younger humans are going to have a better clue about how these
Mhm.
networks just automatically work.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, so you and we should brainstorm about this.
Okay, we will. Well,
Right.
look, so that's the challenge that you're working on, and that's the vision of we have this incredible resource. Berkeley is a big place, and Berkeley has been turning out wonderful people who have
Yeah.
gone on to do great things in the startup world, but in the big company world, in all the tech worlds.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
good,
and to
good.
be clear, I just want to clarify that, we are with 1,000 advisors at Skydeck. Oh, we're making use of them.
Yeah,
That's a tremendous resource already. Right? So that's not to say that we don't actually have advisory support because we sure do. One of the things I'm trying to do a little bit more of is redeploying that huge network to different programs on campus.
uh-huh,
Yeah, because
good,
there's programs on campus who reach out to me saying, "Hey, who do we know? Who do we know who could evaluate these grant applications?" I said, "Who do we know? We have 1,000 people at Skydeck who are looking to help."
good.
Well, there we go.
So, talk a little about what's happened. I mean, Startup Campus, the book, and folks, if you're listening and you haven't got a copy of Startup Campus, the book, I highly recommend it as telling the story of all these hundreds of things that have happened at Berkeley. But what's really been the most important, you think, couple of things that Berkeley took on that have really made the I&E ecosystem now
Mhm.
such a big deal at Berkeley.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things. On the INE website, IANDE dot berkeley dot edu website, we have a time lapse of I guess we'll call them programs that have been on campus in different time periods. And back in 2000, 26 years ago, there was just a handful. There's five or six on this slide. And then as you step through the years, it grows to the 75 that we see today, the representatives on the INE Council. But how did we grow all
Yeah.
those? I mean, was this the idea from the top, from the chancellor's office saying, we need more logos on this screen? Well, that didn't happen, right? I think the secret was that the barrier to entry to putting a logo on that slide was very low. And that's different. That's different from other campuses where, a good example is when I started LSEC in 2021, we didn't get permission from anyone. We Rich Lyons brought in some money to fund it and hired me to run it, and we just said it existed,
Yeah.
right? Suddenly it's a thing, and maybe it comes and goes. Maybe we run out of money after a few years and it doesn't continue because other programs have grown up to take its place. But that low barrier to entry, I think, is the secret
Mm-hmm.
as being just the way that we grew organically.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, I think one of the big fundamental mindset changing programs that happened on campus was back in 2012 with the Baker Fellows Program. So it was a donor funded program to push research in the direction of commercialization, which in 2012, that was a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
Now every campus is trying to put something together like this, and we have other proof of concept programs and grants. But back then, 300K to a lab to push the tech in the direction of commercialization was a new thing. And now we've had 100 fellows since then, and 30 plus companies started because of that. And suddenly, I mean, I think, and also it was competitive to get these grants. It became cool to be a faculty founder, right? Because you're getting these
Yeah.
grants, and then the idea is you spend the money in the direction of like, we're going to make something out of this, fulfilling the university's mission of actually getting the technology out of the lab and into the world for the benefit of the public. So that really changed the mindset just over the last 14 years.
So, talk a little bit to wind up here about what you've done, and then let's kind of bring it into the climate world that you're in. The INE,
Mhm.
many of the INE people are working on energy and climate areas. Um, what advice would you give the climate folks on campus?
Yeah.
That what you've learned. You've already touched on some of this, but we're doing a lot of very interesting climate research. There are more and more climate educational opportunities, classes, and all where there's a Master of Climate Solutions program, and we're working on other things, maybe for undergrad education. Given your experience in watching this I&E ecosystem really just grow tremendously over the
Hmm.
years, what advice would you give the climate community here that we'd like to see? Well, we're doing a lot. We'd like to
Yeah.
see a lot more acceleration of the climate work. What do you
Yeah.
think would be important for that?
Well, you're already doing it, right? I mean, it's BCCN is the network that brings together the resources on campus. This is the number one advice when a group comes from, say, a different university system. Say, Cornell comes, for example, and they say, "Gosh, wow, Berkeley is really tearing it up. Like, how in the world are you being so effective?" And I explained to them how we run the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council and the Wins and Opportunities sheet. I'm like, this is just what you do first, right? You just got to get the different orgs together and get them to know each other and then find ways for them to work together. And it's almost like a light bulb goes off. They said, of course, of course, we should be doing that. And actually, some of the other UC campuses are not doing this and they're implementing it now. That model and you're doing it, can be used in the climate space, right? You bring together the campus orgs who work in the same space and get them to know each other and find ways for them to work together And if MCS and Clean Tech to Market and Baker Labs for energy and materials all find ways to put on joint events or exchange ideas for different programming, I mean that's the more than the sum of the parts type of stuff.
So one thing that's obviously happened in going through Startup Campus and listening to you right here is that money has been made available. You all have done a pretty good job, I would say, of going after and securing money for various parts of the ecosystem now. What was important with that? How was working with UDAR or various other entities seems pretty critical to the growth that you've had. You've had lots of great energy and lots of great ideas, but you've also
Yeah.
had money.
Yeah, yeah. So we've had tremendous support from development. That's for sure. And, like I said, proud alums who want to give back, and again, overwhelming support for giving back to Berkeley. Sometimes the giving back is financial, and that that works out well, right? It allows me to be hired and start a virtual center. It allows other programs to spin up that wouldn't otherwise exist. So yeah, tremendous support from development.
Great.
UDAR.
Glad to see it. And we're working that direction too. As you know, we now have an associate provost for energy, climate, and environment, Rachel Morello Frosch. And Rachel's going to get an executive director for the climate office. I'm doing
Mhm.
air quotes here. Uh, and an executive director, a development director, and a couple of other half-time positions. So going after money is going to be a big part of growing the climate campus to go with the startup campus and to be a part of the startup campus. Okay, final question. Students are out there, students are listening to this. What would be your advice to students directly about how they can get into the I&E world here if that's their interest?
hmm Yeah. Yeah. Well, so many of the 75 logos, the programs that are part of the INE Council are catering to students, undergrads, grad students, postdocs. Some of them are catering to faculty, but what I recommend to students, if they're at all interested, just start going to events. I mean, this seems simple, right? I mean, this is just the magic of showing up. Just, and it could be you go to an event, you say it's a SCET Collider Cup, the final where all the SCET classes, the engineering schools, entrepreneurship programming, the best projects from each of those classes pitch in a Collider Cup. We'll go to that. See if this is exciting, right? And meet people, right? Maybe it would inspire you to take a SCET class yourself. Or maybe you go there and say, wow, this is not for me. Right, right. But maybe it's something else that, I mean, just that's I didn't mention this before in my career path, but the way I went from being a full-time attorney to doing what I'm doing now is I just went to everything possible. And where, half of them looking back, I think, why in the world did I do that? That seems kind of out there, but and some of them were worthless, and some of them, I met somebody that made all the difference.
Yeah.
So that's what I recommend to all students is just go to things that seem interesting. If it's not interesting, skip it next time. Try something else.
Great. Good advice for all of us, and whether it's the climate world or the I&E world. Thank you, Darren. This has been very illuminating, and thank you all out there for listening. I'm Bruce Reardon. This is the BCCN podcast, and we'll see you on the next podcast for the Berkeley Climate Change Network. Thanks a lot, Darren.
Thank you, Bruce.